There are 5 levels of power. Most men will never rise past the first. They will die faceless, submissive, obedient, mistaking survival for strength. But those who reach the final level become something else entirely. They are not kings, they are not rulers. They are the architects of rulers. Their names vanish, but their commands echo. They are shadows that move entire nations, and they leave no fingerprints. This is not a motivational story. This is a manual, a cold one, and it begins where most lives end. Level 1. The powerless. The powerless man does not know he is powerless. That's the brilliance of the system. He thinks his opinions are his own. He thinks his choices matter. He believes that the freedoms he clings to were given to him out of fairness, but they were granted out of calculation. Because a man who thinks he is free will police himself. He will live in invisible chains and defend the hands that forged them. The powerless live on routine and reaction. They respond, they consume, they obey. But ask them why they wake up, why they work, why they suffer, and they cannot answer without reciting someone else's script. Because I have to. Because that's life. These aren't answers. They're chains disguised as wisdom. Look closely. They fill cities. They fill classrooms. They fill churches and jobs and stadiums. And yet, when you really examine them, they are interchangeable. They are the masses, the gray fog that gives cover to those above. The powerless man is not defined by a lack of talent or desire. He is defined by submission. He waits for instructions. He looks for approval. He fears being alone in thought, because if he thinks for himself, he risks exile from the crowd. So he keeps quiet. He laughs when others laugh. He nods when others nod. He bends his spine to survive, never realizing the cost of that survival is his soul. What's worse, the powerless mock the powerful. They throw stones from below and call it virtue. They call ambition evil. They label discipline as toxic. They romanticize weakness because strength reminds them of what they've refused to become. And so they develop coping philosophies, religions that glorify suffering, ideologies that punish assent, politics that reward dependence. They pretend their resignation is morality, but morality without power is theater. It is a costume worn by those too afraid to fight. Watch them closely. Their lives are governed by fear, fear of rejection, fear of risk, fear of punishment. But the most paralyzing fear of all, the fear of responsibility. Because if they admit they're not powerless, they would have to act. And action is terrifying to a man who's built his life on waiting. The powerless believe the system owes them something. That fairness is a law of nature. That someone, somewhere will eventually reward their suffering. But suffering is not currency. Obedience is not virtue. And hoping is not strategy. The man who remains at level 1 will always be used by others. His labor, his time, his attention, all rented out to the highest bidder. He is a vessel, a mule, a body to be placed in the machine. And once that body breaks, it is replaced without ceremony. No history books remember him. No monuments are built for his sacrifice. He lived quietly. He died quietly. And the world moved on without noticing. Now I want you to ask yourself something. Not as a viewer, not as a listener, but as a man. Where are you on this ladder? Don't answer with what you wish were true. Be honest. Are you living reactively? Do you wait for someone to tell you what matters? Do you scroll, nod, agree, follow? Are you just hoping life gets better because you've suffered enough? Powerless men don't feel weak. They feel numb. They feel tired. They mistake exhaustion for hard work. They call busyness progress. But progress without power is just movement in a circle, like a horse on a carousel, round and round, never forward. If you see yourself in this level, there is no shame, only warning. Because those who stay here, they don't just lose the game. They never realize a game was being played. They mistake endurance for intelligence. They believe surviving makes them wise. But ask yourself, if you've survived this long and still feel unfulfilled, still feel anxious, still feel replaceable, then what have you really built? Survival is not success. Endurance is not purpose. And obedience is not nobility. It's time to wake up. Level 1 is not your prison. It's your invitation. And beyond it are the minds who enforce, manipulate, command, and vanish. If you want to rise, you must first stop lying to yourself about where you are. Power begins with clarity, and clarity begins with pain. But clarity is dangerous. Once you see the truth of your position, you can no longer unknow it. And the moment a powerless man becomes aware of his powerlessness, he stands at a crossroads. remain numb, or awaken. If he chooses to awaken, he enters level 2, the enforcer. This is where most men who taste power first arrive. They are not free yet, but they are no longer asleep. They have found strength, physical, financial, or social. But make no mistake, strength without strategy is just elegant servitude. The enforcer serves. He carries out orders. He keeps the system intact. He may rise in rank, but never in sovereignty. And worst of all, he believes this is the peak. The enforcer is seductive because it offers the illusion of dominance. He wears the uniform. He carries the badge. He manages people. He gives commands. He feels respected. But look deeper. His power is borrowed. He does not own it. He is allowed to wield it, so long as he obeys the structure above him. He is strong but leashed, impressive but replaceable, and when the order changes, he follows, even if it contradicts everything he once stood for. This is why so many soldiers, managers, officers, and foremen live in quiet torment. They are depended on, but never in control, respected, but not free, trusted to execute, never to question, because the moment they think too deeply, they become dangerous. And yet, the enforcer is necessary. Systems cannot function without him. The higher powers depend on his loyalty, his predictability, his willingness to suppress his own ambition for the promise of status. And he accepts this deal. In exchange for recognition, he sacrifices independence. He gets structure, but loses vision. He gets authority, but not authorship. This is why so many men build lives around routines of dominance, not to lead, but to feel powerful. They control their households with fear. They bark commands at subordinates. They obsess over rules and punishments. But all of it is a mask for the one truth they cannot bear. Someone else writes their orders. You see them in every workplace. The middle manager who polices others with pride. The officer who enforces laws he privately questions. The father who imitates discipline but fears his own irrelevance. The enforcer clings to duty because it gives him a script. He's afraid of silence, because in silence he might hear his own doubts. He's afraid of reflection, because he might realize how much he's traded for structure. He guards the gate, but never asks who built the gate, or why. He breaks the backs of others for the sake of rules he didn't write. And when the higher powers shift their agenda, the enforcer must smile and comply, no matter how it degrades him, because that is the cost of borrowed power. When it is not yours, it can always be revoked. There is one sign, though, a crack in the armor, that shows the enforcer is ready to evolve. It is disillusionment, that bitter moment when the respect he worked so hard to earn begins to feel hollow. When the medals, the promotions, the applause no longer silence the question echoing in his mind, is this it? That moment is sacred, because only a man who has felt power but lost respect for it can ascend to the next level. Only a man who has tasted control but realized he was still being controlled will have the courage to step out of line. And stepping out of line, my friend, is the birth of freedom. But beware, the path upward is not heroic. It is not praised. When the enforcer questions the system, he becomes a threat. The very hands that applauded him now point in accusation. He is called disloyal, arrogant, dangerous, and so most enforcers stay where they are. They suppress the questions. They silence their own mind. They protect their salary, their position, their rank. But deep down, they know they've traded truth for title. They know they've become strong machines, powerful yet controlled, commanding yet replaceable, valuable yet disposable. The enforcer is not weak, but he is boxed, and that box is crafted so elegantly that most never try to leave it. They decorate it, they praise it, they build careers and families inside it. But if you want real power, the kind that is felt in silence, the kind that bends reality without shouting, then level 2 is not where you stop. It is where you begin to see the structure, see the strings, see the men who never appear, but whose fingerprints are on everything. If you have the courage to question, if you feel the hollowness of applause, if you are starting to realize that obedience and power are not the same, then you are ready to meet the next level, the one the enforcer fears, the one that cannot be ordered because it lives in the shadows and commands in whispers. The man who questions the order but does not yet have one of his own steps into the most volatile realm of all. Level 3, the schemer. This is the level of masks. Here, raw obedience dies and something more dangerous is born, strategic self-interest. The schemer does not serve, he manipulates. He studies people like maps. He trades truth for advantage. He listens more than he speaks, flatters more than he challenges, and watches every move not for meaning, but for leverage. At this level, power is not taken by force, it is extracted in silence, drip by drip, through influence, persuasion, and design. And yet, despite all his cunning, the schemer remains exposed, because to manipulate, you must still be present in the room, still seen, still needed. This level rewards intelligence, but punishes attachment. The schemer cannot afford loyalty, not truly. Every alliance is provisional, every smile is weighed, every conversation is a transaction, a performance, a rehearsal for control. He thrives in courts, in companies, in movements. Anywhere hierarchy exists, but the throne is not secure, he becomes a favorite of kings, an advisor to CEOs, a confidant to generals, but never the king himself, because his power depends on shadows. He is the whisper behind the decision, the one who plants the idea, redirects the blame, spreads the rumor, fabricates the enemy. But if the light ever falls fully on him, the illusion collapses. Influence only works when no one suspects it. The moment you are caught scheming, you are marked. The danger of this level is not failure, it is success without foundation. The schemer is often the smartest man in the room, but he can never stop scanning that room for threats. He fears exposure, he fears being out-schemed, he trusts no one, because he sees too clearly how trust is used, and so he spirals inward. He collects secrets like currency, favors like weapons, relationships like insurance, but inside, he rots. Because a man who cannot be genuine, who must always pretend, loses sight of who he was before the mask. And when that happens, even his victories feel hollow. He wins arguments, but not peace. He gains allies, but not loyalty. He climbs the ladder, but never knows if it will be pulled from beneath him tomorrow. Yet the schemer is necessary. Power structures depend on them, because they do what the enforcer cannot. Bend minds instead of bodies. They create shifts in culture, in alliances, in public opinion. They move people without raising a hand. But their tragedy is this: in gaining so much influence, they lose all security. Their power exists only in tension. The moment they pause, they become dispensable. The ruler begins to doubt them. The people begin to resent them. They become the obvious scapegoat, because everyone knows they're clever, and cleverness, unguarded, provokes fear. In the end, most schemers die with a knife in their back or a whisper in their name. They are remembered not for their wisdom, but for their suspicion. Their gifts become evidence against them. Still, some men love this level. They love the rush of being needed by those more powerful. They love playing both sides, collecting debt, controlling conversations, and for a while they flourish. But look closer. The highest level schemers are not truly chasing power. They're running from irrelevance, because they've tasted proximity to greatness, but cannot stomach the price of stepping into the light. They prefer being essential in secret to being sovereign in truth, because sovereignty comes with blame, exposure, risk, and most schemers, for all their cunning, are still cowards. They'd rather manipulate the king than be the king, because the king is visible, and visibility makes you a target. But if you, listening now, are a schemer, or feel the schemer rising in you, there is still a door, a narrow one. It requires sacrifice, not of your intelligence, not of your strategy, but of your addiction to invisibility. It requires stepping out of the game and asking, what if I stopped shaping the room and started owning it? What if I stopped advising kings and became one, even if it meant being hated, hunted, exposed? That's the cost of transformation. And only those who are ready to lose their edge, to risk being seen, blamed, challenged, ever break through to the next level. The level of visible authority, the crown, the throne, the role that schemers fear because it cannot hide. But those who endure it, they command more than whispers, they command worlds. To cross from manipulation to command is to step into fire. The schemer hides behind influence. The ruler stands alone, in full view of the world. This is level 4, the ruler. No more masks, no more whispers, no more plausible deniability. The ruler must speak, must act, must stand accountable for every consequence his voice unleashes. His power is no longer borrowed, suggested, or insinuated. It is declared, and that declaration marks him for worship, envy, and destruction, all at once. Because when you wear the crown, the knives are no longer hidden. They come smiling, they come applauding, They come dressed as friends, advisors, lovers, and they wait for the moment you blink. The ruler has what the schemer fears, visibility, but he pays with what the schemer enjoys, safety. Power at this level is not built on leverage, it is built on presence. The ruler is the state, the company, the movement. His name becomes law, his face becomes the symbol. But with that comes burden. A single wrong decision, a flicker of doubt, a failed prediction, and the crowd turns. Because the crowd does not love the man, it loves the idea of the man. The moment he disappoints that idea, he becomes a villain. This is why rulers live with constant paranoia, not because they are unstable, but because they see what others refuse to admit. Loyalty is temporary, admiration is shallow, and the very people who lift you up will cheer as you fall. And yet, the ruler must act. He cannot delay, cannot hide, cannot deflect. Every action he takes reshapes the order beneath him. That is the gift of this level, the ability to build. No longer scheming in shadows, now designing in daylight. A ruler with vision can birth an era. A ruler without vision can destroy one. This is why history remembers rulers, not advisors, not generals, not enforcers. It remembers the name that signed the decree, led the army, delivered the speech. The crown makes you immortal or infamous, and the line between the two is thinner than most can tolerate. But make no mistake, being a ruler is not the final level. It is still a role, it is still a position, and positions can be taken. The ruler, though powerful, is exposed. He must perform, he must lead, he must justify, and every day he does, his enemies sharpen their narratives. The ones waiting in the shadows, who never appear, never speak, never err, they watch. They study the ruler's mistakes. They collect his failures like currency. Because they understand a truth the ruler cannot afford to say aloud. The visible throne is not the true seat of power. It is the lightning rod. And so the ruler must harden. He learns to smile while being betrayed. He learns to reward silence and punish unpredictability. He learns that kindness must be calculated, or it will be used against him. And in this process, something dies. The part of him that once sought to be loved is buried, not out of bitterness, but necessity. Because power, once achieved, demands emotional detachment. The ruler must be just, but not naive. He must inspire, but not depend. He must listen, but never need agreement. And if he fails to master this paradox, he becomes a puppet, a symbol moved by the hands of those he cannot name. Still, most men dream of this level. They want the glory, the admiration, the applause. They want to be seen, heard, crowned. But they have no idea what it costs. They think they envy the king until they see how little peace he has, how every word is weighed, how every alliance is a calculation, how every display of strength is also an invitation to be tested. And so most men fantasize about ruling, but flinch at responsibility. They want the benefits of sovereignty without the burden, and in that desire, they reveal themselves as unfit. But if you, yes, you are already standing in this fire. If you know what it's like to command and carry the weight of those commands, if you feel the loneliness of the top seat and have not yet broken beneath it, then you are close, closer than most ever get. The final level does not wear a crown. It does not sit on the throne. It does not make speeches or issue decrees. It is invisible, and it bends the ruler, the schemer, the enforcer, all of them from behind the curtain. That level is not for those who seek praise. It is for those who seek permanence. The most powerful man in the room is never in the room. He does not raise his voice, yet men kill in his name. He does not appear in portraits, yet entire regimes bend to his favor. This is level 5, the puppet master. He is not the king. He is the reason kings exist. His power is not seen, only felt. It lingers in decisions others think they made freely. It ripples through laws others believe they wrote. His genius lies in disassociation, in the art of control without ownership, authorship without signature, rule without exposure. He does not command. He engineers environments where people choose what he has already decided. To understand this level is to let go of ego. The puppet master does not care for applause. In fact, he fears it. Recognition is a weakness. A name can be targeted, a role can be stripped. But a myth, a force, a legend behind the curtain, that is eternal. The puppet master survives because no one can prove he exists. His fingerprints are everywhere, but his identity remains vapor. If you try to expose him, you're labeled paranoid. If you succeed, he already has a replacement. That is the brilliance of true power. It does not cling to a single body. It flows. It reincarnates through systems, symbols, proxies, like a virus with no cure, because it hides inside the host's own DNA. He speaks through others. The CEO who pushes a sudden acquisition. The politician who reverses his platform overnight. The cultural icon who changes the conversation with a single tweet. These are not coincidences. These are designs. And most will never question it. They will debate the symptoms, never trace the source. Because the source is too quiet, too smooth, too embedded. The puppet master does not fight for power. He sets the board so others fight for him. He does not fear rebellion. He manufactures it when necessary. To reset the system, to purge threats, to remind rulers that their grip is rented. He knows that all visible power eventually breeds resentment. The crown becomes a target. The billionaire becomes the villain. The general becomes the tyrant. But what you cannot see, you cannot attack. What you do not name, you cannot overthrow. And so he cloaks himself in foundations, in advisory boards, in offshore accounts, in cultural influence. He funds both sides. He supports rivals. He whispers to kings, then offers sanctuary to their enemies. He plays long games, generational games. And while others chase quarterly wins and campaign cycles, he orchestrates centuries. But understand this, not every schemer becomes a puppet master. Not every ruler can disappear. To reach this level requires one final death, the death of identity. The puppet master has no face, no fixed allegiance, no ideology that binds him. He is adaptable because he does not belong. He is trusted by all, but owned by none. That is why he endures, because loyalty, at this level, is transactional. Relationships are expendable. Even self-image must be fluid. He cannot afford pride, only outcomes. This is the highest, coldest, purest form of power. To influence without needing to be credited. To control without needing to be acknowledged. To disappear and still dictate the outcome. Most men can't imagine this. Their ego needs to be known. Their pride demands recognition. They want to be thanked, praised, feared. And that's precisely why they are vulnerable. Because they leave trails. They seek approval. They crave the feeling of power more than its results. But the puppet master is different. He would rather lose the credit and keep the control. He would rather be forgotten and still feared. He would rather rule in silence than reign in noise. That's what makes him untouchable. Because no one thinks to fight what they cannot see. No one rallies against a whisper. If you followed this path, from the faceless masses, to the loyal enforcer, to the cunning manipulator, to the isolated king, and now find yourself staring into this abyss of absolute detachment, ask yourself, are you willing to vanish to win? Are you willing to trade your name for legacy, your face for force, your fame for permanence? Most aren't. Most need to be seen to believe they matter. But those who endure this final transformation become something else entirely. Not men, not rulers, architects, ghosts, immortals, the ones who shape civilization while remaining invisible in its history. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you already knows. You were never meant to stay powerless. Something in you has seen through the illusion and doesn't want to obey anymore. You've glimpsed what real power looks like. Not the kind they sell you, not the loud, performative kind, but the kind that builds in silence. The kind that doesn't ask permission, and the moment you saw it, a part of you began to change. Now tell me in the comments, are you willing to walk this path, to be feared instead of praised, to be misunderstood instead of liked, to vanish from their applause so you can finally win in reality? Are you willing to let go of comfort, image, approval, for the sake of something unshakable? If this message struck something in you, if it made you uncomfortable, if it made you see, write in the comments, I choose power in silence. Let's find out how many are truly ready, not just to rise, but to disappear from the noise and rise anyway. And don't scroll past the next video, you're closer than you think. And what's coming next, it matters, more than you know. I'll meet you there.